What's up, guys? In today's video, we're going to talk about everything that you need to know about the EVH 5153 LBX. Let's get into it. Okay, before we get started, I just want to let you guys know that I recently started an online merch shop where I'm selling awesome swag like this here, hoodies, tote bags, coffee mugs, stickers, all kinds of good stuff. So if you're interested in helping out the channel, head down to the description below, hit the link for teespring.com and make a purchase. It would be greatly appreciated. Thank you in advance. So you're interested in picking up one of these LBX heads. The tone and power that you get from something in such a small package is unparalleled. This thing rocks. The amp features the blue and the red channel from the EVH line of 5153 amps. The blue channel is famous for the iconic Eddie Van Halen brown sound. You'll hear this type of tone in the rhythm section of every single Van Halen song ever. This is an identifiable tone for Eddie Van Halen, who went on to pave the way for every other hard rock and heavy metal guitarist ever since. The red channel is an overblown high gain monster. This thing is crazy. More gain than you need, this lead channel offers sustain forever, and it's become a staple for modern day metal tone. The LBX features an effects loop, switchable impedance at 4, 8, and 16 ohms, and the crown jewel, switchable power. You can take this thing from full power at 15 watts all the way down to quarter power, which is like 3 watts. And even at 3 watts, this thing is loud. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons. The first thing I'd like to mention is that this amp, for its small size, makes it incredibly portable. It also saves a ton of space in your living room for those that play at home. If you don't have a ton of space for a full 100-watt amp, then this is a great option for you because its footprint is tiny and the sound that comes out is huge. The next pro that I'd like to mention is the fact that you get the gain characteristics of the blue and the red channel in such a small package. You can match this thing up with a 112 cabinet and it's perfect for your living room or bedroom. But don't let the size deceive you. This thing packs a punch. It has the full gain characteristics from what you would expect from an EVH 5153. Both the blue and the red channel, they sound crisp and clear. You can hear note definition, and this thing is loud. Loud. Super loud. In some cases, almost too loud. And we're gonna get into that. Here's an example of the blue channel. Here's an example of the blue channel with an overdrive added to it. Here's an example of the red channel without an overdrive because it doesn't really need it. Now, what you can tell between these tones is that the blue channel tends to be very focused in the mid-range. Yes, it's got less gain, but it's got more punch. It's less compressed and it's much more clear. I think when you add an overdrive to the blue channel, this is probably the most ideal tone for modern heavy guitars. And it still has clarity. It's not all mushy. It doesn't get all muddy in the low end. Nice and crisp. Whereas the red channel, in my opinion, tends to be a bit more compressed. But if that's the sound you're going for, it's got it. It's great. Again, like I mentioned, there's no need for an overdrive. This thing has gain for days. And without an overdrive, you tend to have a little bit of extra low end. I think that this amp is perfectly suited for the bedroom, living room guitar player. It's also great for recording purposes. I actually used this amp on the latest Tape Tone record. You can check out how that sounds with my live stream playthrough that I did a couple weeks ago for the release of the record here. But it sounds great, nice and punchy, perfect size for these things. It also works well for musicians that are playing large venues where you're not really reliant on an amp to fill the room full of sound, where the PA is kind of big enough, festivals, and things like that. True story, a couple years back, I played Grass Pop, and one of the bands that shared the main stage with Propane was Limp Bizkit. And Wes Borland, his rig consisted of 2 of those, and that's it. He had 2 little EVH LBXs, and that was it, and he rocked it. So, goes to show that these little amps are incredibly versatile. Its small size doesn't mean that it's not powerful. It's got punch for days. One of the coolest things about the size of this amp is the fact that it's ready to go. And EVH also sells these awesome gig bags. Now, the amp fits right into this thing and you're ready to go. Once you slide that in, shoulder strap, peace. This is a great amp with a lot of great features, but like anything, it also has a few downsides. Let's get into it. There are a few things about this amp that are less than ideal. The first thing you'll notice when you kick this thing on is it does have a noticeable hiss, especially on the red channel. This is coming from the 12AX7 tubes. This is kind of normal in a 5150 style amp. You're gonna get some hiss from the tubes. It's a high gain amp. Generally, there's 6 of these things in line. That's a lot of distortion. But I've noticed on the LBX, it is a little bit more present. I've noticed that I've had to turn the actual presence knob down, sometimes to about a quarter or even below, sometimes completely off because the amp has too much high end. This is in extreme cases where you've got the volume set to about 2 or 3, which is very loud. I wouldn't suggest turning the volume past 3 because after that, you're really starting to clip off the transients and it's just becoming very block sounding and it's not pleasant. And the other sound that I've heard, and I don't know if this is just from my personal LBX, is it seems to have a 50 or 60 hertz hum. I've tested this thing and it doesn't really seem like it's due to any sort of a bad ground situation. I've plugged it into multiple places. But one thing I've noticed about that hum is that you really only hear it at low volumes. When you turn on the amp and you're really listening, you can hear the hum. But as soon as you turn that volume up, the volume of the amp is then much louder than the hum itself, and you don't hear it so much. The next thing I'd like to mention that isn't exactly ideal is the fact that in this particular model, which is the original model, both channels share the same exact gain knob and volume knob. They're not separated like on some of the later models. What was nice about EVH is they caught on very quick that this was an issue for people, and to avoid them modding their amps and voiding their warranties, EVH just started implementing dual-centric knobs on both the volume and the gain to allow people to independently adjust both of these things across both the channels. However, on the original LBX, these things are shared. So there is a slight volume difference between the blue and the red channel. The blue channel, considering it tends to be a bit punchier, in my opinion, sounds like it's a bit louder. As soon as you engage the red channel, that compression sort of kicks in, and the overall sound seems to be relatively lower. In my opinion, this isn't a deal breaker, but it does make the usability of the amp reduced. Now, I happen to feel like this thing is sort of a one-trick pony. Considering it doesn't have a clean channel, I wouldn't really be using it in situations where I'm using a lot of different tones and switching back and forth anyway. Again, as I mentioned, this compression does kick in and there is a relative difference in volume, but not by much. If you're being mic'd through a PA at a small gig, that compression is not going to be noticeable at all. And you're just going to have a nice punchy rhythm channel and a nice saturated lead channel. And the last thing that I'd like to mention about this thing, I've mentioned it a few times in this video, this amp is super loud. And in some cases, that's great. But in some cases, it's also not. For those of you that are playing at home, in your living rooms or in your bedrooms, you're not going to be able to turn this amp past 1. You might not even get to 1. In fact, in most cases, you're going to turn the volume completely off and you're going to start to bring it up until it just starts to give you some signal. And as soon as it does that, that's going to be about as loud as you can play it in your house because this amp is super, super loud. Now, there is the switchable power. You can take it from full power down to a third power. It does reduce the volume, but in my opinion, not enough to make such a considerable difference. In this case, I would take the 15 watts and just keep it at a low volume. What I would suggest for some of you at home, especially those using effects within the effects loop, is get yourself a decent attenuator. I'll list one down below in the description. I'm also planning on doing a video on attenuators, but I would highly suggest you pick up one of these things so that you can then control the volume a little bit better. This way you can turn the amp up to your normal volume that you would play if you were at band rehearsal or at a gig. Then you use the attenuator to lower the information going into the speaker cabinet and then out into the space. You're able to bring the volume way down, even lower than that of what you're capable of doing at the lowest volume setting with the amp by itself. So, highly recommend an attenuator. Check the link in the description below. All right, so that's the EVH LBX. For those of you that are interested in picking one of these things up, I hope that this video was helpful for you. If you already have one of these things or you have experience with using one, let me know down in the comments. How did it work out for you? How do you use that amp? Do you use it for recording? Do you use it at home just to jam? Do you gig with it? Let us know down below what your experiences are. If you haven't already, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel. Also, give this video a thumbs up or give it a thumbs down if you thought it sucked. That's cool too. But until next time, stay crazy. Peace.